All right, morning everybody. Welcome to Second Cup of Coffee. Pastor Tom here. If you joined us last week, you know who this is. It's Pastor Micah Tucker, real dear friend of mine. And this is a two-part series. He did a story last week that went along with Pastor Elver's Second Cup from a few weeks ago now, talking about who you represent. And Micah was talking about being on the Lees in England, having a hat on that said JC and Jesus Christ around it. A young girl, 11 years old, sees it and literally loses her mind. You can go back and watch it. But that same girl, because she saw how Micah stood for his faith, 1 year later was in church and in a discipleship group with his wife. Yeah. So it's amazing what God can do when we represent him. Even if we don't think we're making an impact, you are making an impact. Amen. I'm so excited about this. Yeah. I love this story every time he tells it. I've tried to retell it and I never get it as good as he did because he lived it. I'm just going to turn it over to Micah. This is the quintessential story about opening a door in somebody's life. And I think you would testify, you didn't even realize you were opening the door.
No clue.
And he didn't even know it. But just listen to the impact that it had on a teenager's life and what God did. So I'm just going to turn it over to him to share the story.
All right. Well, hi again, everybody. We were doing an outreach in the UK in the local community. We rented the high school actually on a Saturday night, the local high school, and kind of did all kind of fun stuff. We did skateboard ramps and rapping and dancing and basketball and football, which is soccer, and all mess of stuff. And the reason that's pertinent is at the end of the event, there was a young man there, and he really loved basketball. And so he's still shooting, and it's 10:30 at night. It's dark. There's just one little light on the outside court. And he's shooting around, and I'm doing my job as a leader, just picking up trash, right? The kids have made a mess. A couple hundred kids from the community there. It's their high school. They had made a mess. So I'm picking up some trash, and he's shooting, and then I would kind of get the ball and throw it back to him, if he missed or whatever, in the midst of picking up the trash. And so this young man, I think he was probably about 14, and he's shooting, and so in the process of everything, I grabbed the ball and I said, hey, Ian, his name was Ian. I said, Ian, why don't you come to church with my wife and I tomorrow? It's a Saturday night. And he said, nah, mate, I don't think my old man would be good with that. And so I threw the ball back to him, and he shot again, and I rebounded a little bit. And so I'm just kind of asking the Lord, what is there something else I can do here? How many of you as Christians have invited somebody to church before, and then if they don't immediately say, yeah, you just kind of feel deflated, defeated, right? But I don't want to give up.
Right.
I don't want to give up. But I knew the young man a little bit, and I played basketball with him some. And so I picked up a few more pieces of trash out of my bag, and I set it down, and the ball came, and I got the rebound, and I held it, and he put his hands out like, hey, throw the ball back. And I just held the ball, and I looked at him, and I said, so Ian, you're telling me you'd go to hell? You'd go to hell for what your old man thinks? And I threw the ball back to him. And he caught it, and he just looked at the ball, and he looked at me, and he didn't really have a response. And then a second or two went by, and he just shot the ball again, and I slapped the ball back. And I left. I went and picked up the trash. I had other places to go, and I left it. And I want to say to you, I've never, that was a lot of years ago, and I had done a lot of outreach before that in a lot of places. I've never said to someone, you'll go to hell. Because of what someone thinks. I've never said that before, and I've never said it since. But Tom, it was a prophetic moment. It was a moment where God gave me this to say to him. And the reason we know that is because the next morning, it's England, so it's always raining.
Right.
And the next morning, we're at church, 10 o'clock service, Sunday morning. And about 10:15, I'm in the foyer, I'm greeting, helping.
Oh, okay.
And this young man comes in, waterlogged, just drenched, and it's Ian. And he had walked 3 miles to church. And
in the rain.
In the rain. Wow. In a cold rain. It's always cold rain in England. There's no warm rain. And he walked to church and just looked like a drowned rat, and just drenched all the way through. And it wasn't a sprinkle. It was a good old-fashioned, England downpour. And so I looked at Ian and I said, man, you are waterlogged. And he said, yeah. He said, I went home last night and I couldn't stop thinking about what you said.
Wow.
Couldn't stop thinking about I'd go to hell for what my old man thought. And his parents, and as we will find out, his brother was very antagonistic. Not just, we don't know if that's a good idea. They were against him going to church.
Right.
So Ian came to church that day. He gave his life to Jesus at an altar call that the pastor preached. And, I did my part. I put it to him. I didn't lead him to the Lord. He came and answered that altar call. But Ian began to have a hunger for the things of God. And so he would come to church sometimes, and then sometimes he'd be missing, and I'd see him. Hey, what happened? Where were you? And he said, Micah, my family does not like me going to church. And he began to tell me about some of the things that were happening to him. His older brother came home from college, from university, and grabbed him by the scruff of the shirt and lifted him off the ground with his forearm against the wall and was screaming at him, you're in a cult, you've been brainwashed, what's wrong with you? And so Ian began to talk about how in order to go to church, he would have to sneak out of a second floor window and go down this trellis thing. He said, some people sneak out to go to a party as a teenager. I have to sneak out to go to church.
Wow.
And so I said, well, if you ever need a ride, you let us know. And so we began to give Ian rides to church, and he began to come. And one time he came on a Sunday, was telling us about his parents finding out that he went to church, and they're screaming and cursing at their teenage son for going to church. And the Lord impressed upon me, and I opened up my Bible, and I turned to Matthew 5, and I said, look, you're in the Bible. And he said, what's that? I said, you're in the Bible, mate. And I said, blessed are you when they revile you.
Wow.
And they persecute you, and they say all kind of evil falsely about you. I said, Ian, here's the important part, for my name's sake. I said, your parents, your family is doing this simply because you're trying to follow Jesus.
Wow.
And it was, as he testified, life-changing for him. Ian then became part of my Bible study in a small group in my home and at our apartment, our flat, and began to be on fire for the things of Jesus.
I don't mean to be preemptive, but years later, I'm talking years and years later, Micah and I ended up on a mission trip together with some other people, Pastor Bob. Pastor Bob takes us into London because we had some time.
Yeah.
And Micah goes, I want to call a friend. He's going to show us around London. And guess who showed up? It was Ian. And just tell them what Ian was doing at that point in his life at the same church, I believe, right? Where you had been a missionary.
Yes.
What was Ian's position at that church when I met him?
He was now basically a youth leader, which was kind of de facto youth pastor. They didn't really have that. And to this day, Ian is the youth pastor, full on married, 2 kids, youth pastor at that same church, following Jesus, completely on fire for the Lord, is about evangelism, about outreach in his community, and tells people to this day about me and about that. And he said, I'm all of this. He just told me this year. We did a Zoom call, Tom, and just checking in with one another. It's COVID, right?
Right, yeah.
We did a Zoom call just checking in. He said, Mike, I still tell people that you were the one that led me to the Lord because you were confident and bold enough to tell me that I could lose my salvation, lose my eternity, go to hell because of what my old man thought. He said that still resonates with him to this day.
Well, so my question for us, I'm asking myself, am I willing to pray, God, say, give me an Ian? You may not have multiple, but you could have one.
Yeah.
And how many is he impacting? I know at 3 that he's impacting for sure. He's got a wife and 2 kids. Plus whoever he's impacting through his own youth ministry, whoever he's led to the Lord. And so this is my other, grace to you today. Don't worry about what they have to walk through after they meet Jesus, because Jesus can walk them through it.
Amen.
If you've got a 14-year-old kid that'll walk 3 miles in the rain just to get saved, climb out of a second-story window without his parents knowing just so he can come to church, you're not responsible for that. Jesus gives the grace to walk through that. But he'll give you the encouragement like he did Micah here. You're right here in the Bible. And he changes his perspective, changes his life, and now he's still going on with God. So, you know what? You have the hearing, just like Micah.
Amen.
All we have to do is get the boldness. Ask God for it. He'll give it to you. Amen. I love that story, Micah. Thank you for joining us the last 2 weeks. I want to have him back later on because he's got other stories that you need to hear about missions right here in the heart of Los Angeles that'll make you laugh and make you cry and convict you all at the same time. We'll do that another time. We love you. God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon.